Hello and welcome to today's video. In today's video I'm taking an old school book and some Worbla and making the Necronomicon. Now originally I was inspired to do this to make it off of the one in Army of Darkness, but I did some research on the old Google and I found some other versions that I actually liked better than how it appeared in Army of Darkness. So it's kind of inspired by multiple versions of the Necronomicon. So, alright, let's get down to the art table and get started. So to start things off, I have my math book. I'm going to go ahead and sketch out the basic shape of the face. So I have an idea of how I want to place it on there, and then I have my reference photo. I'm going to take some translucent clay, and these are both Premo Sculpey, and some white clay, and mix those together and sculpt the eyes. Now that the eyes are done, I'm going to go ahead and mix in a little bit of yellow with that translucent and white to make all of the teeth. So I wanted to do just a bunch of fangs like that reference photo, and I want them to be, just a little bit more stained, like not as bright as the eyes, so that just adding just a little bit of yellow will give me the look that I want. Now it's time to bake our clay. Remember, always bake your clay according to package instructions. Now, one thing about the Necronomicon is it's supposed to be this really old, ancient, evil book. And so the big difference between it and a regular book is manufactured, so the pages are very even. So I decided I would go through this book, rip out some pages, trim some pages down, and just make it so it's nice and rough. And I, wrinkle them up, and even though the book won't be able to be opened, I want them to look good from the side, to look like this really old, dirty, evil book. Once I was done trimming it, I went ahead and placed some weights on it to kind of smoosh those pages, and I let those sit for a while, and then I went back to it and started building up the front of it. My main direction with building up the front was just to give some basic shape for the Worbla to lay over when I heat it up. So I thought I would just build up the forehead some, and then take some of the foil and build up like the basic shape of the face, like where the eyes are, the nose, and the mouth. And then once I had that done, then I could move on to adding some Worbla to it. I felt this was a good enough starting point, so I'm going to start adding some Worbla to the book. So I just heat it up enough so it's easier to cut, get the basic shape, and then I'll go ahead and heat up the entire piece and lay over it with the hopes that it'll form around that face. And so really, it worked out really well. The Worbla's pretty flexible and it's going to seep into those areas. And so I just heat it up and kind of push it in. I use a ball tool to get into some of the crevices, and then just, push it in with my fingers so it forms around that foil. Now with the front done, I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the back. Unlike the front, I didn't have as much direction. I just wanted to put some foil down for the Worbla to go over, just so it had some more texture and, you know, stuck out in different areas. I noticed when I was heating up the book with the Worbla that it was starting to brown some of the paper, so I thought it would be a nice touch to go ahead and use the heat gun and just heat up the edges there and kind of brown some of that paper to make it look kind of, you know, burnt, obviously. I was a little concerned that it was going to get too hot, so I kind of stopped there. And then I'll go ahead and add Mod Podge to the sides of it. Get it in a little bit, just go a few inches in at the front of the book. And that way, this will kind of seal my book shut. I would at some point like to make one that can be opened into like a box, but I wasn't for sure how to do a hinge on it. The cardboard's flexible and the Worbla's not, so I wouldn't be able to open it if I had it completely covered with Worbla. So a Worbla has some give, but it's not going to be that flexible. So at this point I just want to seal the book shut and see how that goes. Now with the Mod Podge on there, I went ahead and added my weights back to it and then went back over with Mod Podge because I want this book to be nice and tight. And then once the Mod Podge is done, I'll go ahead and let it sit for overnight. I don't know the exact drying time of that, but I wanted to make sure I had enough time for it to dry. At this point, I ran out of Worbla, so I had to order some more. I do have some scraps that you'll see in that bowl on the upper right there. But this new Worbla, even though it's, you know, listed as the same price, I think just the way it's manufactured seemed to vary in color a little bit, so it was quite a bit lighter. Normally that's not a problem because I paint the entire project, but with this piece, instead of painting the entire project, I just wanted to give it a brown wash. So I didn't know how much this would stand out. So I decided to do these kind of skull evil faces on it. I'm doing a couple of them. And then I figured if I kind of blend in the sides, it'll look like, you know, maybe even if they're lighter, they're kind of popping out a little bit. Although my idea from the Necronomicon came from Army of Darkness, its original or its origins are from H.P. Lovecraft, and in his writings, it doesn't really give a lot of detail of what it looks like, but a lot of things are referred to as it's kind of leather bound, and I thought it'd be cool, like if it's covered in leather, animal skin, then it might be somewhat patched together too, especially if it's ancient. So I thought it'd be cool to have this section of it, using the lighter Worbla and then having it kind of stitched on there. And I always, like to challenge myself when doing different projects, and I thought it would be cool to do this and do these little stitchings on it. And I was really happy with the results on this. Now, there's two reasons why I started with the back as far as doing all the sculpted detail. One, I knew I would do the face on the front and I didn't want to damage that after I flipped it over to work on the back. And then also I wanted to kind of experiment with some things. So I went ahead and added, you know, like the faces, but I also wanted to add these kind of vines to it. I don't necessarily want to specify what they are. I don't really have, you know, an idea of what they actually are. I just wanted the viewer or, you know, anybody looking at it just to see, you know, is that like a plant or is that some kind of weird tentacle? You know, just want to just kind of have it this creepy, evil look to it to help, you know, represent what the book is. Another thing I did on the back here was I added a little bit more Worbla, and then I used the ball tool to go in and make it, you know, give it some texture. And I thought this would be a good look to try on the front. So I wanted to go ahead and do this around the edge of it. And then I'll go ahead and go over to the front and do a similar technique there. I'll go ahead and finish up the back here with a little bit more of that texture detail with the ball tool, and then I'll flip this over and start working on the front. So I started with the eyes. I just heated up the Worbla where the eyes go and push those into place. And then to finish those up, I'll go ahead and cut some kind of half ovals and make some eyelids for those eyes. The next section I want to work on is the mouth, and looking at the teeth, I realize I need to kind of build up his upper lip there to give me a little more Worbla to kind of push those teeth into. So I just heated up another little section and then attached that and kind of worked that in with the ball tool. And then once I was done with those, I decided to go ahead and cut my teeth into halves. Originally I was going to use it so like one end would be the root and it would be easier to push in, but I realized these teeth were so long that I would be pushing them through, and I just didn't have enough room on, you know, his lips to do that. But I figured if I did them in halves, that would work fine. With the mouth complete, I'll go ahead and heat up some Worbla and outline that nose and build that up some. Now with the face done, I thought I needed to build up his forehead a little bit more. It just wasn't sticking out very far, so I thought I would just add a little bit more foil and then cut out some Worbla and place that over the foil I just added. With the main details of the face done, I can move on to covering the rest of the book, front of the book with Worbla. And so I just cut off small sections, heat it up, and press it on so it'll bond with the rest of the existing Worbla. And then once I have it attached how I want, I'll go ahead and use a ball tool to, smooth in those sections, kind of even it out, and then add that texture I wanted for it. Now that texture with the ball tool I thought would work really well with the brown wash to give places for that paint to seep in, and then I'd have the different tones and make that detail really pop. At this point, I was really happy with the front of the book, so I thought I'd go ahead and move on to the spine of the book. And then I thought, hey, why don't I do some kind of spine going from the bottom to the top of the book? I was really happy how this turned out, but then looking at the front, I thought it needed a little more to it. So I thought it'd be kind of neat to have kind of these bony type fingers coming off of that spine and then wrapping around to the front. And, technically, I'm not necessarily calling them anything kind of like how the back was with those vines, but, I just wanted to look kind of just creepy and evil and just kind of go with the rest of the book. With the sculpting done, it's time to move on to the painting. And so what I'm doing is a brown wash, and so I take the brown paint, I use acrylic patio paint, cover the book, and then take a wet paper towel and wipe off the excess. And what this does is it gets the paint in those crevices, and then those parts that stick out farther will kind of pop more because they're going to be a lighter color. And I just do the entire back of the book this way. Lots of times on Worbla projects, in fact all the Worbla projects I've done before, I'll do a primer on it first. But since I just wanted the paint to, be in those crevices, I wasn't too worried about it. Even if this book gets handled, the paint shouldn't come off because you're most likely touching areas that, don't have a lot of paint on them. Plus, I thought it was nice that, doing this, it kind of stains the book even in the areas that you wipe off. And I think that made it, give it a nice old dirty look to it. And you'll notice that underneath the book now is a piece of foam. It's about 1 inch thick. And I did this so I could rest that front of the book on it. And I wouldn't, hopefully, wouldn't break off any of those teeth. Now, acrylic paints do not take that long to dry, especially when it's not very thick on here. But in between doing the back, the edges, where the pages are, and the spine, and the front, I let it sit for a couple hours just to make sure it's completely dry. When washing that wet paper towel over it, I didn't know, if that would dilute it a little bit, take it also a little bit longer to dry. So I let it sit for a couple hours before I actually moved on to the next section. That way, when it was resting against the foam here, it's not, going to be rubbing off or losing that paint on the back there. And I did the same thing here and let it sit and dry after it was done. So the last thing to do is to paint the front. This is a little bit trickier because I've got, a little bit deeper with the mouth there. And, although I don't mind getting the paint on the teeth since they should be, dirty and old and yucky, I still want them to show through and have that yellowish white, off-white color pop on them. With all the painting done, I went ahead and let it dry again for a couple hours. I'm going to go ahead and add some more Mod Podge on it. When I was doing the heat gun to add the more of the Worbla to it, it did kind of separate the pages a little more than I wanted them to be. So I thought I'd go ahead and add some more Mod Podge and then add my lead weights to push that book together and then finish off the Mod Podge on it again. And like I did the first time with the Mod Podge, because I'm not sure how long it takes it to dry, I will go ahead and let it sit overnight before I go back to it. So I thought it was done, but then there was a few areas that kind of bothered me. The tooth on the top left there that I'm working on had a little bit of a gap, and it wasn't pressed up against the mouth. I didn't like it, and I didn't think that was how it should look. So I went ahead and heated up a little bit more Worbla, pushed that in there, and then took the brown wash over it again to get it kind of blending with the rest. And the other issue I had was there was some of the blue from some of the pages kind of showing through in some of the areas. So I went ahead and added a little more paint there. And then this last section, I didn't feel I had enough brown on it. So I went ahead and went over that one more time with the brown wash. And here is the finished Necronomicon. Thank you for watching today's video. If you have ideas for future videos, please leave them in the comments down below. And if you have any questions about this project, please leave it in the comments down below as well. These skulls here, or the little skull faces that I did on this left side here, were inspired by some of the early artwork for Doom. I'm also really happy with how the stitch work turned out in the upper right corner here. I think adding that brown wash really helps on that and just makes that detail pop. So thanks again for watching today's video, and remember, never stop creating. Bye! You can purchase items with my mascot on it from my TeePublic Store. And you can purchase my one-eyed blobs from my Etsy shop. Links to my TeePublic Store, my Etsy shop, my Facebook page, and my Instagram page are in the description box below. Klaatu, Vrata, no!